There comes a moment in life when you realize that not everyone deserves a seat at your table, not because you're better than them, but because you've worked too hard for your peace to give it away for free. You've survived storms no one saw. You've stitched wounds with your own hands. And now that you finally stand on your feet, calm and composed, some people still try to pull you back into the chaos they refuse to leave behind. Toxic people don't always look dangerous. Sometimes they come with smiles. Sometimes they speak the right words. But you can always feel them, draining your energy, unsettling your thoughts, leaving you questioning your worth after every interaction. And the worst part? They often make you feel like you're the one overreacting, like you're the problem. But there's a quieter power you can access, a stillness that doesn't scream for revenge, but chooses peace. The Stoics knew this. They didn't teach us to become cold. They taught us to become clear. When Epictetus said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters," he wasn't asking you to suppress your feelings. He was teaching you where true control lives, not in the world, not in others, but in your response, in your silence, in the door you choose to close and never reopen. You don't have to fight every battle. You don't need to explain your boundaries. You don't even need to say goodbye to those who hurt you. Because the strongest farewell isn't a dramatic exit. It's your absence, your indifference, your unwavering self-respect. That is the Stoic way. It's not passive, it's powerful. It's the kind of power that doesn't seek to dominate others, but to liberate yourself from them. And when you learn this, when you truly understand it, not just in theory, but in the way you walk, speak, and protect your peace, those same people who once drained you will no longer find a way in. Not because they changed, but because you did. So today, we walk that path together, the Stoic path to inner peace, not through arguments, not through revenge, but through quiet strength, conscious detachment, and a refusal to be disturbed by those who never had your well-being at heart. If you've been holding on, waiting for the apology, the closure, the justice that never comes, maybe it's time to try something different, something final, something that heals, not through words, but through silence. 1. Forgive quietly, but never reopen the door. There's a misconception about forgiveness that traps many people in cycles of pain. We're told that to forgive means to forget, to let go, and to welcome the person back into our lives, as if healing requires the relationship to be restored. But that's not what the Stoics believed. Forgiveness, in its purest form, is not a favor to the other person. It is a form of self-liberation. It's not about saying, "What you did was okay." It's about saying, "What you did no longer controls me." And in that quiet decision, not shouted, not announced, you release yourself from the emotional grip they had on you. But make no mistake, just because you forgive does not mean you leave the door open. Toxic people often return not because they've changed, but because they want to see if you have. They test the locks. They knock softly at first, disguised as regret or nostalgia. And if you hesitate, if you give even a crack of attention, they slip in with the same patterns wrapped in different excuses. The Stoic doesn't entertain this. He doesn't wait to see if they've grown. He doesn't argue with their intentions. He simply knows the chapter is closed, and his peace is not up for negotiation. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury." And what that means here is simple. You don't return to the fire just to prove you can handle the heat. You don't need to relive the pain to show that you've healed. You heal once, deeply, privately, and then you guard that healing like a sacred space. You forgive them not to absolve them, but to stop carrying them in your heart. But the door? That stays shut. Think about this. How many times have you reopened a door out of guilt or loneliness, or the false hope that they've changed? And how many times did that lead to more disappointment, more pain, more questioning of your own self-worth? There is no wisdom in repetition of suffering. There is only a lesson unlearned. The Stoic does not ignore this lesson. He learns, he lets go, and he moves forward, not with hatred, but with clarity. So the next time you find yourself wondering whether you should respond, reconnect, or give them one more chance, pause. Ask yourself, am I doing this out of growth or out of habit? Is this act expanding my peace or exposing it? Forgiveness is complete when it no longer needs to be proven. You don't need to text them, explain it to them, or get them to understand it. You simply choose it. And then you walk on, because when the mind is clear, the door stays closed, not out of anger, but out of wisdom. That is where true peace begins. 2. Their power ends where your reaction stops. There's a simple truth that most people overlook. Toxic people don't thrive on cruelty alone. They thrive on your reaction to it. Every time you explain yourself, defend your character, or rise to their bait, you're giving them exactly what they want, your energy. And in doing so, you hand over your peace like a gift they didn't earn. But here's what the Stoics understood long before modern psychology echoed it. No one can disturb you without your permission. As Epictetus taught, it's not what happens that disturbs you, but your judgment of it. That's the key. It's not their words, their silence, or even their betrayal that truly hurts you. It's how you interpret it, how you respond to it, how you allow it to define your state of mind. So what happens when you choose not to react? When you refuse to give them the emotional fuel they crave? Something powerful. They lose control, because suddenly their game no longer works. Their chaos no longer finds a stage in your life. And that frustrates them, not because you've attacked them, but because you've become unreachable. That is real strength, not loud, not aggressive, but invulnerable. You become like a rock in the middle of a storm, untouched by the wind, unmoved by the waves. This isn't about suppressing emotion. It's about mastering it. It's about training yourself to pause before you respond, to evaluate whether the battle is even worth your energy. Because most of the time, it's not. Most of the time, the real win is walking away without a single word. Not because you're weak, but because you know that silence carries a weight far heavier than noise. The Stoic path teaches us this: to rise above, not to sink to their level. And that begins the moment you stop letting their behavior dictate your state of mind. It might feel unnatural at first. After all, we're wired to react, to defend, to prove, to fight for our dignity. But what if dignity isn't something you fight for, but something you quietly preserve? What if your refusal to engage is the highest form of self-respect? Toxic people hate that, because without your reaction, they're left with their own discomfort, and they can't handle it. They need someone else to carry it for them. When you stop reacting, you give that discomfort back to its rightful owner. You say, without saying a word, "Your chaos is no longer welcome in my mind." And here's the truth you must remember. Not reacting isn't weakness, it's strategy. It's spiritual discipline. It's you reclaiming the only power that ever truly mattered, your response. The world will test you, people will provoke you, but the Stoic stands firm, unmoved, knowing that the moment he chooses peace over performance, he wins. 3. Toxic people. feed on your energy. Starve them with silence. Toxic people rarely come looking for solutions. They come looking for reactions. They don't feed on peace. They feed on the conflict they create. Your frustration, your explanations, your raised voice. That's their nourishment. The more you try to reason with them, the more they twist your words. The more you defend yourself, the more they find ways to pull you back into their chaos. And if you're not careful, you'll spend years trying to explain yourself to someone who has already decided not to understand you. That's not miscommunication. That's manipulation. This is where silence becomes not just an act of restraint, but a weapon. Not the cold silence of passive aggression, but the Stoic silence, calm, composed, unbothered. Because when you choose not to engage, not to defend, not to react, you shift the dynamic, you starve the chaos, and in time they grow weaker, not because you've fought harder, but because you've refused to fight at all. It's a strange kind of power, isn't it? The ability to remain still when someone else is trying to stir you. The ability to look them in the eye and offer no fuel. That's not being cold. That's being in control. Seneca once wrote, "The greatest remedy for anger is delay." And in the pause, in the delay, in the refusal to respond immediately, you create distance. That distance becomes your protection. Because here's the truth. Not everyone deserves your emotional labor. Not every attack deserves an answer. Some people speak not to resolve, but to dominate. And the more words you give them, the more room they take inside your mind. But silence, when chosen wisely, is a locked door they can't pick. It leaves them outside. It forces them to sit with their own noise. And it reminds them with painful clarity that they no longer have access to your peace. You might worry that your silence will be misunderstood, that they'll paint you as heartless, cold, or arrogant. But ask yourself this: why does their opinion still matter? Why is their misunderstanding of your boundaries more important than your well-being? The Stoic doesn't need validation from those he's chosen to walk away from. His silence is not his weakness, it's his clarity. It says everything that needs to be said, without wasting a single breath. And maybe, for the first time, you give yourself that gift. The gift of no longer explaining your pain to those who caused it. The gift of no longer keeping the door cracked for someone who only brings in darkness. The gift of complete, intentional silence. Because once you understand that your energy is a currency and they've been overdrawing from your account for years, the only answer left is this: stop giving, withdraw your attention, reclaim your space, and let your silence do what your words never could. 4. Silence is strength, not weakness. In a world that shouts, the quiet ones are often misunderstood. We're taught that to be powerful, you have to be loud, that if you're right, you should prove it, that if someone disrespects you, silence means surrender. But the Stoics knew something different, something deeper. They knew that true strength isn't loud. It doesn't seek to overpower. It doesn't rush to defend itself or make a scene. True strength is rooted, grounded. It doesn't move unless it chooses to. And silence, when it comes from a place of control, not fear, is one of the most powerful expressions of that strength. We often associate silence with passivity, but that's only because we've been conditioned to react, to speak, to justify, to correct the narrative. But imagine this: someone lies about you, twists your words, provokes you, yet you remain still. Not because you're defeated, but because you're free, because their chaos no longer deserves a reply. That silence, it echoes louder than any argument. It unsettles those who rely on your reaction to feel relevant. And that's why it's so powerful, because it says, without saying anything, you no longer have access to me. Seneca once wrote, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste a lot of it. And we waste so much of it trying to prove ourselves to the wrong people, arguing with the insecure, explaining ourselves to the dishonest, trying to find peace with those who benefit from our confusion." But the Stoic sees through that. He doesn't fall for the bait. He doesn't react to every insult, every whisper, every challenge, because he knows a lion does not turn when a small dog barks. This kind of silence is not coldness, it's precision. It's knowing which battles to fight and which ones to walk past. It's the difference between living on impulse and living with intention. And once you develop this stillness, this internal clarity, people notice. Not because you shout about it, but because your energy changes. You don't flinch, you don't chase, you don't respond to noise with more noise. You simply stand, observe, and let others exhaust themselves trying to get a rise out of someone who refuses to rise for them anymore. But to reach that point, you have to let go of the need to be understood. That's hard, because we all want to be seen, to be heard, to be acknowledged. But the Stoic doesn't chase external understanding. He finds peace in internal alignment. He knows that silence, when chosen, is not avoidance, it's mastery. It's a clear message. I know who I am, I know what I value, and I don't need your permission to protect it. This kind of silence requires courage. It's not about bottling up emotion, it's about channeling it, about stepping away not because you're afraid, but because you've grown, because you've realized that not every injustice needs a reaction. Some simply need distance. So if you're dealing with someone who keeps testing your peace, who pushes your buttons, doubts your decisions, or tries to drag you into conflict, try this. Don't respond. Not with sarcasm, not with defense, not with explanation. Just observe, breathe, and remain still. That silence will speak volumes. It will say, I'm no longer available for this conversation. And in doing so, you rise above the noise, not by force, but by presence. Because the strongest voice is the one that knows when not to speak. 5. Boundaries don't need justification. One of the most liberating truths you'll ever embrace is this. Your boundaries are not up for public debate. You don't owe anyone an explanation for protecting your peace. You don't need to justify the space you create between yourself and someone who drains your energy. Yet so many of us feel guilty the moment we say no. We fear being called selfish, dramatic, or cold. So we over-explain, we soften our voice, we apologize for having needs. But in doing that, we betray the very boundary we're trying to set. The Stoic doesn't ask for permission to draw the line. He draws it quietly, clearly, and once. Not out of cruelty, but out of self-respect. Marcus Aurelius reminded us, the tranquility that comes when you stop caring what they say, or think, or do, only what you do. That's the core of it. A boundary is not a rejection of others. It's a commitment to yourself. It's the moment you say, I'm no longer willing to abandon myself just to make others comfortable. Think about how much time we spend trying to explain our distance. We say things like, I just need time, or I've been really busy, or it's not you, it's me, all because we're afraid that a firm, unapologetic boundary will make us look bad. But the truth is, those who are truly healthy and secure will respect your space. They won't question it. They won't demand a detailed report. It's only the ones who were benefiting from your lack of boundaries who will protest when you finally build one. And that's exactly why your boundary doesn't need a backstory. It doesn't need to be written in soft language or wrapped in disclaimers. It just needs to be lived, not as a rule you broadcast, but as a quiet, consistent way of being. The Stoic doesn't announce, "I'm cutting you off." He simply stops giving access to those who don't deserve it. He doesn't explain the walls he builds, because he knows what they're protecting. This is especially difficult when it involves people you've loved, helped, or invested in. People who've seen your vulnerability, but that's precisely why boundaries matter even more in those situations. Because the ones closest to us can also cause the deepest harm when left unchecked. And your silence, your distance, your limits, they are not a punishment. They are a form of protection, of clarity, of healing. When you set a boundary and someone asks why, it's okay to simply say, "Because I needed to." That's enough. Your peace is enough. Your growth is enough. And you don't need to shrink it down to make it digestible for someone else. The moment you start explaining your worth, you invite it to be questioned, and that's not strength, that's compromise. So if you've been holding back, waiting for the right words to justify your boundaries, let this be your permission to stop, to walk away without guilt, to say no without explanation, to reclaim the time, the energy, the self-respect that you've spent too long giving to those who didn't honor it. Because the Stoic knows, boundaries are not walls of bitterness, they are doors of wisdom, and you don't have to ask anyone if it's okay to close them. 6. Walk away without noise or drama. There's a kind of exit that doesn't involve yelling, tears, or long-winded goodbyes. It's the quiet kind. The kind where you simply stop showing up, stop replying, stop explaining, and instead reclaim your peace with absolute finality. This is the Stoic exit, not emotional, not theatrical, but complete, and it's one of the most powerful decisions you will ever make. Because walking away without noise doesn't mean you didn't care. It means you've chosen to stop wasting your care on those who never valued it. The world teaches us to seek closure, to have the last word, to make sure the other person knows exactly why we're done. But what if real closure doesn't come from a conversation? What if it comes from clarity, from the decision to prioritize your peace without needing approval, validation, or understanding? That's what the Stoic understands. He doesn't need a dramatic exit to feel strong. He doesn't need to be heard to know he's right. His peace doesn't depend on someone else agreeing with him. It depends on him agreeing with himself. Walking away quietly is not a sign of weakness. It's a reflection of emotional maturity. When someone mistreats you, manipulates you, or repeatedly disrespects your value, you don't owe them a dramatic conclusion. You owe yourself a new beginning. And that new beginning starts when you leave not just physically, but emotionally, without turning around to check if they noticed. Toxic people thrive on drama. They want you to erupt, to argue, to say something regrettable, because it keeps the cycle going. It gives them another scene to dissect, another opportunity to twist your words. But silence, calm, focused, intentional silence, that breaks the cycle. It closes the curtain. It denies them the audience they crave. And in doing so, it robs them of the control they once had over your emotions. It's not always easy. There's a part of you that will want to explain, to be understood, to get closure. But closure isn't about them understanding you. It's about you understanding yourself. It's about knowing, deep down, that you gave enough, tried enough, endured enough, and now enough is enough. You walk away not because you're giving up, but because you're waking up. The Stoic doesn't slam the door, he simply walks through it, never looking back. He doesn't broadcast his absence, he lets the silence speak for him. And that silence says everything. It says, I've outgrown this. It says, I no longer need this in my life. It says, I choose peace over proving a point. So if you're holding on, hoping for the perfect moment to leave, waiting for them to change, or crafting the perfect goodbye, consider this. You don't need their permission to let go. You don't need to explain your healing process to those who caused the wound. All you need is the courage to leave quietly, completely, and with full intention. Because the most powerful exits aren't the ones that echo through arguments. They're the ones that echo through absence. The ones that leave no open doors, no unfinished business. Just a clean, quiet break. A decision to protect your soul without making a scene. 7. Absence reveals the truth. There is something strangely revealing about distance. When you remove yourself from someone's life, silently, calmly, without warning or conflict, what's left behind begins to speak, loudly. Absence becomes a mirror, one that reflects everything presence used to hide. And this mirror, unlike your words, cannot be argued with, distorted, or ignored, because your silence forces the other person to sit with their own noise. Your absence becomes the first time they've ever had to face themselves, without you standing in the way. We often believe that staying is the path to clarity, that if we talk more, explain better, try harder, we'll finally be seen and valued. But here's what the Stoics understood. Not everything needs to be solved through dialogue. Some things are revealed only through silence. Some people can only see their impact on you when you're no longer around to absorb it. When you step back, patterns come to the surface. You start to see who reaches out and who only takes. Who notices your silence and who was never really listening to begin with. Epictetus once said, if someone succeeds in provoking you, realize that your mind is complicit in the provocation. It's not just about stopping your reaction, it's about stopping your availability for toxic dynamics altogether. And sometimes the most powerful way to do that is not through confrontation, but through absence. Not a passive, waiting kind of absence, but an intentional one. A decision to remove your presence, your energy, your emotional labor, and let the silence do the rest. Because silence, when chosen wisely, becomes a spotlight. It shows you who needs access to you to feel whole, and who actually respects you enough to reflect on their own behavior in your absence. It reveals truths you couldn't see when you were too close, too invested, too involved in managing the emotions of others. Absence is a filter. It separates what is genuine from what was convenient, and what you learn in that space, you can't unsee. For many, this process is painful. We don't want to disappear. We want to be understood, appreciated, missed. But here's the hard truth. If someone only starts valuing you when you're gone, they never truly valued you at all. They valued what you gave, not who you were. And that realization, as heavy as it is, sets you free. It frees you from clinging to potential. It frees you from rewriting their character with hope instead of facts. It frees you to start choosing relationships based on mutual presence, not just proximity. The Stoic doesn't use absence as a punishment. He uses it as a test, not to manipulate, but to illuminate. He doesn't leave to create chaos. He leaves to create clarity. And in that clarity, he sees who respects his space and who only filled it with noise. The beauty of this practice is that it doesn't require anger. It doesn't demand confrontation. It simply invites reality to reveal itself. So if you've been drowning in confusion, wondering what someone's intentions really are, try stepping back. Give them space, not to fix you, but to show you who they really are when you're not there to carry the relationship alone. Their actions in your absence will tell you more than 1,000 conversations ever could. Because some truths don't emerge when you're looking for them. They only rise when you stop holding everything together. 8. Guard your attention like a fortress. There's a silent war being waged every day, not over your money, not over your time, but over your attention. Toxic people, negative influences, and chaotic situations all compete for the same thing: your focus. Why? Because where your attention goes, your energy follows. And once they have your energy, they can shape your emotions, your thoughts, even your identity. But the Stoic learns to protect this resource above all else. He treats his attention not as something casually given, but as something sacred, guarded like a fortress, with gates that do not open for just anyone. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The things you think about determine the quality of your mind. Your soul takes on the color of your thoughts." It's not just poetic, it's practical. Whatever you let into your mental space, every complaint, every insult, every manipulation, starts to paint the walls of your inner world. If you spend your days reacting to every small offense, chasing every false obligation, explaining yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you, your mind becomes a battlefield. And peace? It becomes impossible. The Stoic doesn't live that way. He understands that focus is life, that what you dwell on, you become. So he decides, intentionally, ruthlessly, what gets access to his attention. He doesn't entertain gossip. He does not argue with fools. He does not let toxic people rent space in his head for free. Instead, he asks, is this worth the cost? Will this bring clarity or confusion, growth or regret? And if the answer is no, he lets it go. Not with bitterness, but with discipline. This level of awareness takes practice, because in a world designed to distract you from yourself, from your peace, from your purpose, it's easy to give your attention away in small, unnoticeable ways. A message you shouldn't have replied to, a conversation you didn't need to finish, a social feed that pulled you into someone else's chaos. But these small leaks over time drain you, and you wonder why you're exhausted, why your thoughts feel scattered, why you can't focus. It's because you've left the gates open too long. To protect your attention means more than avoiding negativity. It means actively building a life that supports your focus. It means creating boundaries that aren't just physical, but mental, saying no to things that don't nourish you, walking away from people who demand attention but offer nothing meaningful in return, taking back your time in the quiet moments, choosing stillness over stimulation, solitude over noise. This isn't about becoming cold or distant. It's about becoming clear, because once you truly value your attention, you stop throwing it away for approval. You stop letting others dictate what's worthy of your focus. And you begin to experience something rare in today's world: peace of mind, a clear head, a steady heart. That is the reward of a guarded mind. So if you've been feeling overwhelmed, scattered, or emotionally drained, don't look at your calendar first. Look at your attention. Who's had access to it? What have you been feeding it? What thoughts have you entertained that don't deserve to live in your mind? Because a Stoic understands, you are the gatekeeper of your mind. And once you start guarding that gate with clarity and conviction, everything changes, not just how you feel, but who you become. 9. You don't owe closure to the one who broke you. One of the most painful illusions we hold on to is the idea that healing requires closure, that in order to move on, we need a final conversation, an apology, an explanation. We wait for the person who hurt us to offer clarity, to admit their fault, to acknowledge the pain they caused. But that moment often never comes, and even when it does, it rarely brings the peace we hoped for, because real closure doesn't come from someone else's mouth. It comes from your own decision to stop bleeding for those who wouldn't even bring you a bandage. The Stoics teach us that peace is an internal discipline, not something granted by others. You don't need a final dialogue with the one who lied, manipulated, abandoned, or betrayed you. They already gave you their answer in their actions, and those actions said everything. When someone shows you who they are through consistent harm, your job is not to decode their behavior or extract a confession. Your job is to walk away with your dignity intact and your silence louder than any closing words could be. Seneca wrote, "It is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more that is poor." And sometimes what we're craving isn't money or success. It's emotional completion from someone who never had the capacity to give it in the first place. That craving keeps us stuck in loops of overthinking. Maybe if I just explain it better, maybe if they finally understand how deeply they hurt me, maybe then I can move on. But the Stoic doesn't seek emotional riches from empty pockets. He recognizes that some people cannot offer what they've never learned to hold. Closure is a myth when it depends on someone who refuses to take responsibility, and clinging to that myth only delays your healing. The longer you wait for them to make things right, the longer they stay in control, not of your life, but of your peace. And you deserve better than that. You deserve to close the chapter, not because it ended the way you wanted, but because you are done rereading a story that only brings you pain. True closure is not loud. It's not a text, a phone call, or a final confrontation. It's the moment you decide that your mental health, your growth, your future are more important than understanding someone's cruelty. It's the quiet, "no more," you whisper to yourself. The deleted message you never send. The realization that no apology, no explanation, no amount of honesty could undo what was done or rebuild what was broken. And that's okay, because you're not here to repair others. You're here to repair yourself. The Stoic path is not one of vengeance or bitterness. It's one of freedom. Freedom from needing validation. Freedom from being understood by those who refuse to see you. Freedom from the exhausting cycle of waiting for something that may never come. If you're still hoping for closure, ask yourself this: what would it even change? Would it undo the nights you couldn't sleep? Would it erase the emotional weight you carried alone? Or would it just delay your healing one more day? You don't owe closure to the one who broke you. You owe clarity to yourself. You owe yourself the choice to move forward without waiting. To say, "This is over," not because they said it, but because you did. And in that decision, you take back your power. 10. You are not meant to stay where you are. Disrespected. There is a subtle but dangerous lie many of us internalize, that if we just love more, give more, tolerate more, eventually we'll earn the respect we deserve. We stay in relationships, friendships, or environments where we're quietly dismissed, openly criticized, or emotionally sidelined. Not because we don't know we're being disrespected, but because we hope our patience will turn the tide. But the truth is, respect is not something you can beg for. It's not earned through sacrifice or suffering. It's revealed in how others treat you when they think you'll never leave. And if someone continually shows you that they don't respect your voice, your time, your worth, your duty is not to convince them otherwise. Your duty is to leave. The Stoic does not remain in places where his value is questioned. He does not stay silent while his dignity is slowly eroded. He recognizes disrespect not as something to fight against, but as a signpost pointing him elsewhere. Marcus Aurelius reminds us, the impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. If disrespect stands in your way, then leaving becomes your way, your path forward, not with anger or revenge, but with certainty. But let's be honest, leaving isn't easy, especially when there's history, love, shared dreams, especially when you've invested so much of yourself trying to fix what's broken. But the hard truth is this: no amount of effort can sustain something that thrives on your absence of boundaries. And the longer you stay in that space, the more you begin to internalize the disrespect. You start to doubt your worth. You begin to accept silence where there should be support, criticism where there should be care, neglect where there should be presence. Over time, you shrink, not all at once, but slowly, quietly. You make yourself smaller to keep the peace. You tolerate more to avoid conflict. You start walking on eggshells just to be tolerated. And that isn't love. That isn't loyalty. That is emotional erosion. And the Stoic refuses to live that way. He knows that life is too short to waste in places that drain your soul just to keep appearances. Walking away from disrespect doesn't mean you hate the other person. It means you finally love yourself enough to stop settling for less than your standards. It means you're no longer available for mistreatment disguised as jokes, criticism framed as just being honest, or emotional manipulation masquerading as love. It means you've realized something powerful. Peace is more important than proximity, and dignity is more important than loyalty to dysfunction. When you remove yourself from environments that disrespect you, something beautiful happens. Your confidence starts to return. Your clarity sharpens. You begin to attract people and situations that mirror your self-respect, not your wounds. But none of that can happen until you choose to leave the space that teaches you to question your value. So if you're waiting for the disrespect to stop, for them to finally see your worth, consider this. What if the very act of staying is what convinces them they never have to change? What if your silence is being read as consent? The Stoic doesn't stay to prove a point. He leaves because his peace is the point. And he understands that the cost of remaining where he is disrespected is far greater than the discomfort of walking away, because you're not meant to live on the edge of someone else's approval. You're meant to stand firmly in your own self-respect and let that guide every decision forward. 11. Leaving isn't escaping, it's evolving. There's a moment in every inner journey when you realize that staying is no longer a sign of strength. It's a symptom of fear, fear of starting over, fear of being misunderstood, fear that leaving means you've failed. But that's not the truth, not the Stoic truth, because leaving, when done with clarity and calm, is not an escape. It's an evolution. It's the deliberate act of stepping into a new version of yourself that no longer tolerates the same pain, patterns, or people that once defined you. And that choice, to leave not with bitterness, but with resolve, is a sign of immense growth. Many people confuse detachment with coldness. They believe that walking away from toxic people or unhealthy situations means you lack compassion, or worse, that you're running away. But the Stoic knows better. He understands that detachment is not about being emotionless. It's about refusing to be emotionally manipulated. It's about recognizing that clinging to what's hurting you is not love. It's fear in disguise. Epictetus taught that freedom is the only worthy goal in life. And sometimes that freedom begins the moment you say, "I'm done trying to fix what only breaks me." Walking away is not weakness. It's a declaration, a line in the sand, a quiet revolution in your soul that says, "I no longer wish to carry this weight." You're not fleeing, you're ascending. And yes, it may hurt. Yes, it may confuse others. But your path is not for their understanding. Your evolution doesn't need their validation. Leaving becomes necessary when staying means abandoning yourself, when the space you occupy starts to shrink your spirit, cloud your mind, or dull your light. That's when it's time to go, not in anger, not in haste, but in peace. And that kind of exit is powerful because it's not reactive, it's intentional. It's you reclaiming authorship over your own story and refusing to let anyone else write your ending. Still, the world will try to guilt you for it. They'll say you changed, that you're not the same, and you'll have to smile and say, "That's the point." Because evolving means outgrowing old roles. It means breaking cycles, shedding identities that were never yours to begin with. It means allowing discomfort to shape you into someone who no longer waits for things to get better, but becomes better and walks away. It's important to understand that evolution doesn't always come with applause. Sometimes it comes with silence, with solitude, with the ache of starting over. But the Stoic embraces that solitude. He sees it not as loneliness, but as space, sacred space, for transformation. Because what you gain when you leave what no longer serves you is far more valuable than what you lose. And what do you gain? You gain clarity, confidence, self-respect. You gain the quiet knowledge that you are no longer stuck in survival mode, that you don't have to keep proving your worth to people who never saw it. You stop chasing peace from those who only offered chaos, and in that moment, you stop escaping and start evolving. So if you're standing on the edge, uncertain whether to go or stay, ask yourself this: am I holding on out of hope or out of habit? Am I here because I'm growing, or because I'm afraid to grow alone? Because the Stoic knows, when you leave with clarity, you're not running, you're rising, and no one rises by staying in the same place they were broken. 12. Let your composure be the final word. There comes a point where you stop explaining, stop defending, stop proving, and you simply stand. Not with arrogance, not with defiance, but with composure. That quiet strength, that unshakable calm, becomes your final word. Because you've learned that in the presence of chaos, noise, or personal attack, your greatest power is not a sharp reply. It's a steady presence, one that doesn't flinch, one that doesn't feed the fire, one that says, without saying a thing, "You no longer have the ability to move me." Toxic people want your reaction. That's how they measure their impact. When you explode, they feel powerful. When you defend, they feel important. But when you remain composed, when you smile without sarcasm, stay silent without bitterness, and walk away without drama, you take that power back. And more than that, you take away their illusion of control, because suddenly they're shouting into a void. They're arguing with someone who's no longer playing the game. The Stoics understood this well. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." And composure is the proof that you've found that strength. It's the visible sign that you've moved your center of gravity inward, that your emotions are no longer dictated by someone else's dysfunction, that your identity is no longer shaped by external approval, conflict, or apology. But let's not pretend it's easy. Staying composed when someone is provoking you, insulting you, misrepresenting you, that takes real mastery. It takes a deep breath when every muscle wants to react. It takes vision, the kind that sees beyond this moment and remembers who you're becoming. Because composure isn't just about silence, it's about sovereignty. It's about choosing peace again and again, even when ego wants to shout. And when you do that, when you hold the line, stay grounded, and speak only when it's worth speaking, you earn something far more valuable than a fleeting win in an argument. You earn your self-respect. You look in the mirror and know you didn't stoop. You didn't lash out. You didn't lose yourself. And that internal victory, it stays with you long after the conversation ends. Composure also teaches others how to treat you. When people realize they can't get a rise out of you, they stop trying. When they see that insults bounce off your clarity like arrows off armor, they grow frustrated, even confused. But that's not your problem to solve. That's the weight of their own reflection. And you're too busy moving forward to carry it for them. The truth is, the world doesn't need more reaction. It needs more restraint. More people who can stay calm in chaos, who can protect their energy without explanation, who can say, "I choose not to participate in this," and mean it. That's the Stoic path. Not cold, not distant, just sovereign. So let your composure be the final word, not because you're afraid to speak, but because you've evolved past the need to prove anything. Your silence, your stillness, your peace, they are enough. And in a world full of noise, that is the loudest message of all. You do not control how others treat you. You only control how long you allow them to. That single sentence is a quiet revolution. It shifts the power dynamic entirely, because we spend so much of our lives trying to fix, to reason, to earn better treatment from people who are not willing to give it. We try to explain ourselves to those who've already decided not to listen. We sacrifice our peace for the illusion that we can change someone else's behavior if we just show them how much we care. But care alone is not a cure for toxicity. And love, without boundaries, becomes self-destruction. The Stoics taught us that power begins the moment we stop trying to control others and start mastering ourselves. You can't change someone's nature. You can't force someone to respect you, value you, or treat you well. But you can control how long you stay. You can control what you respond to. You can control whether you allow their presence in your life to continue draining your spirit, or whether you step away and close the door. You are not weak for walking away. You are not cold for choosing peace. You are not heartless for refusing to be used. You are simply awake to the fact that your life is too precious to waste in emotional war zones where your value is questioned more than it is celebrated. You are not here to be everyone's emotional punching bag. You are here to rise, to grow, to protect your stillness like a sacred flame. And that begins by understanding that your reaction is your responsibility, and so is your freedom. So from this day forward, carry this reminder. Your peace is not a product of how others behave. It is a reflection of what you allow, and you have the right, the responsibility, to allow less, to require more, to walk away sooner, to speak less, to preserve your power, not in anger, not in bitterness, but in mastery. And when someone asks, "Why didn't you respond?" or "Why did you leave?" you don't owe them a speech. Let your composure answer. Let your silence answer. Let your new life answer. Because the Stoic doesn't fight every fire. He simply stops walking into flames.